is one of the most evidence-based project management body of knowledge PMI has brought out. They use 48,000 data points from practicing project managers, from for-profit, not-for-profit, from construction, manufacturing, IT, all different domains. They really try to bring everything more evidence-based instead of being an ivory tower approach. So this is a global practitioner insights. There were 2 rounds of public feedback as well after they had collected those data points. So there was a very rigorous process where you, I, or anybody we have worked, we could provide feedback, and they incorporated that. So there were 12 subject matter experts from 10 different countries who are the core development team, and they incorporated that public feedback, and those 12 members from 8 countries were part of the review team. So overall, there were 12,000 community comments, as you would imagine, because project management is a huge domain. Things I could be doing in some IT or engineering functions, they're a little different from healthcare or construction. So, but they all come together, and our language or our conversations, they are all come together in a very similar way. So this community comments brings this really value to them. So it's an 18-month of overall iterative development and validation that was needed. And why this addition matters, it's more accessible and streamlined approach overall. Adaptable across industries and sectors, inclusive of all development methods, evidence-based as we talked about, and community-driven. It's a globally accessible language. That's the beauty of PMI. You could be in South America, you could be in Australia, you could be in Africa, or any practically this is one, when I attend PMI Leadership Institute meetings, that's where I feel I meet practically everybody from all different countries. So it's really one thing in common, that it's a global domain, and how we can add value in different contexts is really so. It's a globally accessible language, and once we see the PMP, the value we drive, it is portable from multiple countries to multiple domains. So it's a globally accredited standard. So that's where so 8th edition really shines. So we did consolidate in this PMBOK from 12 principles to 6 principles. So it is a really goal was to simplify and minimize the overlap and improve clarity and making them more actionable. So this is one way to look at approach-wise, that it's really brings things simple. And as you know, it's much easier to write 20 or 100-page document, but to streamline it and to simplify it, it's much harder. So that's why I feel this is a great value add to bring it to 6 principles and simplify, instead of, because the previous PMBOK was a lot of pages and it was hard to read, but now it is lesser pages, 100 to 150, and it's much more consolidated and focused. So similar concept, process groups, that's a major change. Let me see if anybody has waiting in for us or anything, just curious. So, nope, I think we are good. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so, great. I'm taking notes as you're talking.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So, and I'll send that out. So process groups are now focus groups for more flexibility. So this is the 5 categories remain, but the new terms reflect the broader application. So rationale is reflect modern project management work process practices and policies. So this was kind of missing, unfortunately, in the previous edition. They never went away. So PMI had a different standard, and they incorporated those in that. But the reality was the global standard or the global document that PMP and the project management professionals for the exam or as a reference to their profession, they was using project management body of knowledge. So practitioners were missing these process groups significantly. So PMI heard, and the teams that were working for the 8th edition, they really brought them back. So process groups, initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, they came back in the 8th edition, which is a very welcome and a positive development. And if somebody is preparing for the PMP, they will not have to look at multiple places. Even though PMP should not be looking at only the PMBOK, of course, it is more than that. But PMBOK is the gold standard where we derive our basic understanding for the PMP exam. So some other example changes, performance domains. We restructured from 8 domains to 7. So the new 7 domains are governance, scope, which includes quality. So quality used to be a separate domain, but again, once we look at requirements management or scope, quality should be built in. So it's really a mind shift change, which is a very really good way to look at that. We want quality embedded into scope. Once we have certain criteria or requirements management, how we go about them, so that should be a part of it. So that's why we consolidated from 8 to 2. Schedule, again, in the 4th edition, when I took PMP many moons ago, that was called time, and the finance was called cost. But this is really good way to look at a new structure, how we manage our domains. Stakeholders are very important. And that is one of the key aspects where project managers or any domain, even if AI 100% takes over, stakeholder management is still one of the key aspects where the human aspect we need to really harness. And I feel and I believe AI is going to help us a lot, but it will not be 100% changing how we do manage. So this is where I think the real excellent project managers will shine, that they will automate many of their other aspects, but they will focus more on the qualitative aspects of their job, or how to manage the stakeholders and how to bring different parties in sync and coins, which is a key aspect, and that's where the project's value, and we'll talk about that, will shine. So resources, risks. So this is a really good way to look at 7 domains. So we are introducing 40 processes in the 8th edition, again, backed by the popular demand, which is really the community spoke and PMI heard. So those are non-prescriptive adaptable processes are back again. So because if we think about construction versus IT versus healthcare versus finance, things could be or not for profit. All 5 are very important domains, but things could be a little different. So we cannot prescribe that this process group must follow this certain methodology or certain. So this is why they are non-prescriptive, but they are really good, strongly advised how we can adapt. So they combine 6th edition. In the 6th editions, they used to be called ITTOs, which were input, tools, techniques, and outputs. And then we had domain in the 7th edition. They come together, and the 8th edition comes as a single domain process group for these process groups. So guidance is illustrative, it's not mandatory, but it's a tailoring advice. Sustainability and quality PMI is really big into this, ESG goals. And when we look at people, profit, we also look at planet. So what we do, how we do, is important. So because we do have a stake, and project management profession as itself, we can bring to the executive management or the stakeholders and impress upon how we can be a good stewards, not only of this project, but to this planet as well. So it doesn't have to be a win-lose proposition. We can still we can be a good value add to the project and us with the stewards as well. So this is very important. PMI is taking a lead in terms of ESG goals and sustainability. And one of the big introductions is AI and technology integration. So there's a new appendix in the new PMBOK on the AI and technology. We talk about automation, predictive analytics, risk ID, resource optimization, among other factors. So they are really important aspects. And this is evolving. So again, really, it's every week some new models are coming up, new changes are coming up. AI is really one of the moving pieces. So it's going to be a domain, and the PMI is keeping up with the Infinity. So now we are Infinity 1, 2, and 3rd edition for the Infinity, which I'll go in a little detail in a little bit, is already on that. So, and the 4th one is in progress. So ethical focus and the modern PM tools, cloud collaboration, virtual teams, cybersecurity. So we want to make sure ethically we are responsible. We are minimizing our bias. It's not to say that bias can 100% it can be subjective, but we want to try to avoid as much as bias. So in this AI, and it's again, models are being retrained and LLMs are working. So it is one of the uphill ethical aspect we all should be aware of and should be minimizing, and the human oversight should be still required. We cannot, at this point, even if we go AGI, at some point, we want AI to be responsibly under human under training as well. So let's talk about adopting a holistic view, which is our first principle. So systems thinking. Systems thinking is a very important aspect when we look at project success. Just like in any enterprise, any business, if you're only focused on, or if the employees are only focused on their particular subset or very small domain, and they're not talking to other teams or how their collaboration impacts with other departments or other functions, the success is not going to be very big. So it's important to understand that we want to adopt a holistic view that projects happen within a um, enterprise and within a culture. So we want to bring those organizational strategy, interdisciplinary approach, integrated decision making, enhanced communication, and across all stakeholders, and manage uncertainty and complexity proactively. So our goal is not to be reactive, but to be proactive. So, for example, an NGO could be adopting its health project to align with a government initiative, so which can help with the gaining grants and wider reach. So we want to look at broader picture. So it's really important in terms of integration management, systems thinking scenarios, risk management questions, stakeholder engagement scenarios, project alignment with strategy. So all this come together when we look at governance, scope, risk, and stakeholders. So let's talk about focus on value. So value is the ultimate success indicator, and that is one of the major changes when we look at eighth edition. In the last year or two, PMI has been one of the core message of the PMI as an organization has been to focus on value, because for longest time we thought, or we are under understanding that if we can deliver on time and budget, that's a success. But is it really a success if we do not see the value, if the stakeholders or the project teams or the product company or the product environment, we do not get a lot of value out of it? So what does that project actually do? So that it's what, in a sense, we get what we measure. So if we are measuring the wrong things, we are not going to be able to see. So, and there is a broader shift happening that we should be holding our business or executive management to higher standards, and the focus should be on value. So this is why the project management discipline itself is evolving. And when we are the benchmarking and as we evaluate our performance against other metrics, how we measure ourselves in terms of value addition or value delivery, that is going to be the ultimate game changer. And that's why project management is going to become more significant in years to come, even with the advent of AI. So it's very fast moving domain we are looking at, and the value and the AI, it's going to help us. And as long as we are staying ahead of it, we are involved, we are abreast of these changes. Actually, our profession, project management, and overall organizations, this is going to be a bigger success than we have seen. So this is one of the qualitative, quantitative terms. We continuously evaluate and adapt to maximize value as such. So another one is embed quality into processes and deliverables. So the core message is quality is everybody's responsibility, because it's, when we define quality, is performance minus expectations. So that's why if you looked at earlier slide 2, we talked about scope. So we are bringing quality into scope. So it should not be management separately, just like with in the manufacturing early 17 days when Charles Deming tried to inform control charts and the control statistical process control, that it is not the technician's fault, for example, that the parts are not being in this particular, without going into too much detail, it's a mindset shift. It took a while for manufacturing, for the automotive to come back to understand what Charles Deming was saying, but quality is integrated. We should be everybody. So it's not the just one person or one quality queue of quality assurance or any of the other department. We should all be building it up and delivering and processing. So once you look at those dimensions, performance, resilience, efficiency, conformity, satisfaction, sustainability, reliability, uniformity, compliance. So all of this can come together, and they are really understanding for the quality control and quality assurance as such. So it's very important. So our goal is, if we do things right and if we integrate everything proactively, we should be able to prevent instead of inspect, because that takes away our resources down the road because we don't have to spend multiple layers of inspection if we build things right. So we still have some checks, of course, before we provide it to the customer, but we want to make sure we can try to prevent it instead of waiting for final checks. Be accountable leader. That's very important. Demonstrating leadership by being responsible and taking ownership of project objectives, actions, and decisions. Some of the recent great methodologies we have heard: leaders lead by example, of course, by servant leadership. That is very important. So again, project leaders, we may not have authority in certain domains, but how we lead is how we define our success. So some of the best leaders I've worked on, they may not even have the titles or the organization heads, but they actually took the charge of the situation or the leadership, and they were able to bring the change from that level onward. So it's again, it is being a title or being a certain domain does not impact how leadership. And so again, sometimes many project managers work with cross-functional teams, which we may not have direct oversight, but we can bring the best out of them and with their capabilities, and we can, as a team, we can succeed and help the organization level to the next level. So integrity, honesty, respect, and humility, great traits, shared leadership, self-awareness, and emotional quotient, very important, because we talked about having intelligence is important, or it's not a bad trait, of course, but emotionally, we should understand how other people are coming, and to minimize toxicity in the organization in all its manifestations, when everybody comes together toward a single goal, that is the real and absolute success measure when the organization can succeed in the long term. Flexibility and adaptability and leading by example. So there should not be different standards or different goals for different departments or goals for different measurement criteria for different team members. So this is it's easier said than done. Most of the organizations do a great job, but it's always when there is a culture shift happening. Again, some of the great, we're talking about football, some of the great football teams that have been successful, they have a great culture. They have everybody working towards the same goal instead of one person not happy and then they're going to the media. That destroys the culture, for example. But the great teams, they have been leading by example, and they show on the field that they are fighting as one team. They go towards the goal and they are able to beat the adversity. So another principle is integrate sustainability within all project areas. So we talk about people, planet, profit. We're meeting those present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. So elevating to explicit principle in the 8th edition. So it's very important. It's a triple bottom line. We want to focus on people, profit, but also as a planet sustainability. We want to minimize avoiding negative outcomes, impacts, compensate offset outcomes, so organizational benefits. So employee satisfaction, enhanced reputation, direct cost savings. We have lower operational costs and new market opportunities, access to finance as well. So all of these are coming together. And once we look at sustainability, that it should not be a special project on its own. If we integrate sustainability, how we think about it, how we look at it, how we are looking at, for example, RFPs from our suppliers, requests for proposals, or we are partnering with different organizations. We need to do, and just like, for example, if you are sourcing a project requirement or procurement, and if we have certain criteria, we want to make sure that that supplier is meeting certain criteria from their viability standpoint, or they have been able to provide that service to different organizations or different competitors in a positive way. We would check their reference. We also should possibly could look into their record of how they are able to sustainably help. So this is all holistically we can bring together when we look at success, people, planet, and profit as well. So the principle 6 is empowered culture, very important. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. What does that mean is we could have the best strategy, we could have the best ideas that are flowing, but if we do not have the culture to implement it, we are not going to be very successful. So for example, core values, trust, empowerment, diversity, collaboration, they are really, really important how we bring different ideas. For example, diversity of thought. If we all have certain ideas which are all in line with certain domain, we may actually be blindsided by a competitor right away because we don't have different ideas to attack that problem. So collaboration, diversity, empowerment, trust, this is all where it comes together because we want to have varied perspective. Once we have different perspective, we can actually see the value, how we can uh, bring about a challenge in a different way. Team agreements establish clear working norms and behaviors. Interpersonal skills, integrity, respect, and empathy are very crucial. Psychological safety encourages open communication, which is one of the key aspects. Once we look at great teams, they actually allow open collaboration instead of having my way is the right way. Of course, no organization should be doing it, but once we have a culture of non-participation, people shut down and they may not be able to bring it up. So this is one of the examples. For example, unfortunate event in 1986 when Challenger went down. So engineers knew the problem, but there was a culture problem at that point that nobody wanted to bring it to top management from the considerations from the fear reasons. So NASA turned around. They have turned the culture really well, very good. But there is unfortunate incident where sometimes you have concerns, but if you are not feeling comfortable enough to share with it, that can cause. So culturally, it's very important how we build empowered culture and the teams, especially when the project management teams come together. We go through, for example, forming, storming, norming, performing. Again, this will be very important once we go to the PMP preparation. But and so just like organization, those small project management teams will have their own culture. Again, that culture, subculture is still part of the broader culture, but it's important to make sure we can harness the true value once we bring the teams together. So now we can talk about some domains. We have governance, performance domain, framework for decision making and value delivery, some structured governance, some self-governance. So there are multiple ways how we can organize teams. So more recently, the teams have been moving toward more flat line instead of 10 different layers, and teams are becoming self-governed, self-organizing, but they still need some structure, of course. So this is on two different subtexts. So there will be a very linear, regimented, like in a military, which makes sense because we are looking at special projects that could be very well valued. But on the other end, extreme end, you could have a fully self-organized team that could be doing certain things that could particularly work in some IT projects very well. But again, for the most of the departments or the most of the functions, things are going to be somewhere in the middle. So you still have oversight and there will be self-governance, but how we can bring the governance together in terms of signaling and feedback mechanisms. Again, there is no, it's like a project management itself is a toolkit, not one approach fits all sizes or all situations. So this is where a good project management learning and understanding to go into depth really helps instead of half knowledge or half truths, because that can become more of a hindrance instead of just like a lingo. So scope, performance, domain. Again, we talked about bringing the quality into it. Quality is integrated into the scope management. That brings up very important concepts: scope creep, acceptance criteria, definition of done. For example, that comes from the agile space, plan, scope, and requirements. So PMP itself is now pretty good balance between plan-driven and agile. Many years ago, that was not the case. Then sixth edition, the Agile Practice Guide was introduced, and since then, progressively, as we move along, we see it's a very healthy balance of 50-50. So, those some of the experts who would say that only plan-driven works, or somebody who is agile purist, that is both could not be more wrong, because now more and more, as you see, there is a very healthy interbalance between these two. There could be some domains where agile is really great fit in the same function, or there could be plan driven because it's an easy, because for example, if you're pouring concrete, we don't need to be doing multiple iterations on that. That could be overkill applying to that particular function. But again, so this bringing plan driven and agile, that's where the acceptance criteria, definition of done, scope requirements. Again, this will be a big topic in the PMP preparation exam when we go into that. But for now, scope and integration with the quality is really one of the major changes, along with the value addition realization in the PMP 8th edition is very important. So schedule performance, again, this is an important topic once we look at project management. Time is, of course, once we have baseline, it's critical path. And you may have heard about the schedule variance, for example, or schedule performance index. Again, some of these earned value metrics, some organizations like the Defense Department or in the aerospace, I've seen a lot of them using it quite a bit more, but some organizations they do not use earned value at all. But every organization is using some method of scheduling, whether it could be using a project management software or Excel or even some of the basic Gantt charts. Again, this is where we are all learning and improving things. So lead and lag adjustments, float, resource leveling and smoothing, rolling wave planning. So this all schedule performance domain is another domain. So finance, which is cost, budgets. Again, projects do not happen in a vacuum. So again, one of the key aspects as a good project manager is as long as we can see where the value is being delivered and how our project success ties into organization's successful goals or criteria, the chances are that will be much more easy to keep on a successful path, because projects do get cut, unfortunately, when the belts gets tightened, when the budgets are cut, or when some broad macroeconomic changes happen. But as a good project leader, if we can align our project success and the goals and the cost towards the overall project success, and that's where some of these techniques will be really good value. How the funding needs or the cost of quality, ROI, 3-point, all this, if we can incorporate them into our project success criteria, our chances are we'll be able to align. And frankly, if our project is not adding value and if it's the market situation, market demands change, we no longer have the luxury of 2-year project without any change. The reality is market conditions, overall broad economic conditions, they are all changing all the time, and we should be adapting it quickly. And sometimes we may make the decision that it's better to spend the resources to set different project if we are successful. So opportunity cost is an important topic we'll discuss when we look at PMP exam prep, but to sunk cost or the opportunity cost are very important, because it doesn't mean that we have spent $100,000 on this, that we have to spend the rest $200,000. The rest $200,000 could be spent on a better project if the market conditions have evolved and our project is not going to be of much value. So all these important considerations, again, it ties back to our holistic thinking and the systems thinking. We should be all thinking of organizational success instead of just being this particular project. So, but as a good stewards and a good organization with a culture, it should be a healthy, positive culture that as a leader. So just like the NASA example, if a project leader actually brings it up to the meeting that this project is lesser value than the other one, instead of being putting on the wrong spot, they should be appreciated, and they should be adjusted into the new domain. So this is a culture shift. So value, we talk about value. It's not like, okay, we had discussed last quarter that we're going to meet this particular scope, time, and cost, but instead of realizing, so that's where I think the old school, when we had agile movement about 15, 20 years ago, they really took off. That was in reaction to that mindset that we had discussed it. So construction, that works great. For example, we cannot build a skyscraper, 40 stories, and we stop after 20. That, well, we cannot do it. We finish 40 build because the structure or the foundation, everything is great. But most of our other domains with the IT, with the technology, and some engineering functions, things are changing way too fast. So we have to be adaptable, and we should be able to change it on the go. So that's where the cycles, iterations have really taken off. So bringing those two together and marrying them in our approach, which works, is going to be one of the main topics when we look at PMP, how we can succeed, especially with the AI. AI is upending the game in a very positive ways, but if we do not stay ahead of it, it can have a very negative impact how we look, because our competitors or other departments, they will be able to add value 10 times faster than us if we do not evolve our domain. So we are actually going to be adding time, because AI is one of those, if we have a right process and if we have a right input, it can 10x that positively. But if our process and if our approach is not very streamlined, And if we try to bring AI, it's going to be 10 times negative. So we'll talk about some of those things once we go deeper into preparations. But this is finance is very important, and how those domains and stakeholder we touched upon a little bit earlier, but stakeholder is one of the key important aspects, and that is where even with all the AI and the technology advancements, it actually leaves us a little bit more time to focus on the human to human aspects, how we can bring, because how we can read the room. AI will never be able to read the room. Of course, when we are looking at a boardroom meeting, or we're talking about some of our customers, or we're talking about some of our sponsors, or some of our main benefactors, all of them could have a different approach or different understanding. So again, having a same LLM prompt is not going to be, for example, solution to any of those. We have to understand the room so we can have the game plan ready, but we can adapt it on the fly. So stakeholder is an art more than a science. So that's where a good project manager or good leader will always define. For example, we have to have a different high thread with the power interest grid. This is one of the key aspects of stakeholders. So we want to be able to, if somebody's power and interest is high, we want to manage closely. But if somebody is low and low, manage. But if somebody is low and low, and if we are sending daily emails, that is not going to be a huge value add. So again, having those small, these small consideration understood, and make sure that we can plan and adjust those success, so we don't overexert ourselves. We are not spending too much of our resources, but we are also making sure that we can because executive management would hate to get two-page status updates every day. That would be a short way of getting on the delete list, right? Because they will not be able to read the two-page status updates. But that will be the internal team meetings and stuff. They will need a quick summary how we are doing it. So again, stakeholder management is an art, and we will focus once we look into the PMP exam and the preparations down the road. Resources, another way to look at great. And we'll go into some of the how we can build our resources using AI and a little bit. Team development, motivation, resource leveling, stopping conflicts, competition, norming, cohesion, processes, form, performance. All these are important, and collaborative win-win. So again, conflict resolution is very important. And if an organization or a project does not have a conflict, there's a problem, because we should have a conflict. Now it's a healthy conflict. So now if we let the conflict fester without resolving, then becomes a problem. So because if we don't have a conflict, that means everybody's on a single train of thought. Nobody is questioning anything. Nobody is bringing a different thought process. There's no diversity of opinion, which actually is a bigger problem, because now we are not going to be able to stay ahead of the competition, because now we are very straight, single-minded thing. And reality is we are in a very fast-pacing markets or overall economy. So we need to be having different thoughts. Like conflict, we can collaborate, which is a win-win, or smooth and accommodate. We can withdraw or avoid, which is temporary, but it can going to cause problem down the road if it's not resolved. And force and direct is a win-lose. So that is not the best way to go and compromise. So again, these details will go into more once we go into the exam prep as well. Risk management is very important. Every project has certain amount of risk, and we build into that how to manage it. And there's an upside to it as well. When the risk becomes a positive, that becomes an opportunity. So there are the negative risk, which is threats. So we want to avoid strategy. We can transfer it, mitigate it, or we can accept it. So we can acknowledge it within the domain, within the 5%, for example, within the financial. We are okay with it. We don't want to spend, because if we try to tackle each and every possible risk, that would be extreme effort without much reward. So we have to accept certain risks, but we also understand that certain risks we have to avoid at all costs. So again, having those considerations, and it's a team process. Not one person should be doing only the risk process. That would not be very productive, because they will not be able to anticipate or even understand. Because just like when we talk about safety or quality, it's an everybody that comes together. So we have all understand, and there should be, that's why the qualitative aspects of our domain, bringing everybody's input and collaboration brings up very important. So we can look into probability and impact matrix, and then we can look into some of those domains and how if somebody high probability but low impact, and if it's how important it is, and those kind of considerations. So 40 processes, that's another way to look at how we can organize by performance domains, focus areas, again, governance, scope, schedule, finance, stakeholder, resources. So they are all total 40 processes divided between these 7 domains. And there are 5 focus groups, which were called process groups. So small terminology change, but those initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and closings, again, they'll come together in the 40 process groups. Again, initiation and planning. I will not go into too much detail because that would take the nitty-gritty. I wanted to cover the meat of it, but once we go into the PMBOK or the preparation, there will be more details. We look into the focus area, stakeholder resources, exam focus, monitoring and control, closing. So these are all sustainability and quality integration. These are important aspects. So integration, quality, prevention over inspection, and quality assurance, process oriented versus quality controlled. So again, AI is being incorporated into project management. So there's an appendix in the 8th edition. And we look at predictive analytics. So our goal is to forecast outcomes. The risk management, identify risks early. Optimization, we should be able to optimize resources. And efficiency, automate routine tasks. Again, this is where AI is going to shine. We can automate some of the tasks which are redundant or which are not adding value. That way, we can minimize our time on those domains and focus on the value add with the stakeholders or with the sponsors and all the other value add aspects. So we can use selecting, tailoring, untailoring project, key influencing factors, for example, delivering project organization. So predictive versus adaptive. Plan-driven is predictive, adaptive is change-driven, and hybrid is a combination. So again, agile and adaptive, that is 2-week iteration. So we have a unique scope, but there's a time and cost is fixed. So we have like 7 resources, for example, working within that 2-week cycle. So time is fixed, cost is fixed, and then we decide what we want to accomplish in those 2 weeks. That's adaptive or agile. And the predictive, like pouring concrete, making a building, construction, that's more predictive. So, but reality is more of our new and newer projects or domains, we are becoming hybrid. So we may be using some adaptive, some plan-driven, and that's the beauty. So again, as a good leader, just like a chef, they will know what particular recipe you can use different ingredients in the right order. So that's where it becomes a finesse and becomes more like an art than a science. So preparation tips, again, this is a mindset shift. We'll talk about, I just want to see